Claire wasn't like most kids at school. She was the kind of girl you'd barely notice. Quiet, kept to herself, and always buried in her books. Some would call her shy, others would say she was just a bit awkward. But to a group of students, she was something much worse. Every day, Claire's walk through the school halls was an obstacle course of sneers, snickers, and whispered insults. They called her names, knocked her books down, and made sure she knew she didn't belong. Claire never fought back. She'd just lower her head, mutter an apology even when it wasn't her fault, and hurry off to class. The bullying wasn't new. It had been going on for years. At first, it started small, snide comments about her clothes, or the fact that she spent more time in the library than with people. But as time went on, the bullying escalated. The more they picked on her, the smaller Claire seemed to shrink into herself. And the worst part? No one did anything about it. The teachers turned a blind eye, the other students looked away. Claire was alone. But what no one knew was that Claire had something they didn't see. Something she kept hidden under the surface, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. As the end of the school year approached, so did the biggest event of the year, the school science fair. Most students saw it as an opportunity to pass science class with minimal effort, but for Claire it meant something more, something much more. She didn't talk about it, but for months she had been working on a secret project, a plan, something that would change everything. Something that would prove to herself and to everyone else that she was more than just a target. But the stakes were high, and Claire had no idea if her plan would work. The day of the science fair loomed closer. In the hallways, the bullies ramped up their taunts, sensing her nervous energy. "What's the nerd working on now?" they'd tease. "You really think anyone cares about your stupid projects?" Claire kept her head down, saying nothing, her stomach twisting with anxiety. Every insult made her doubt herself more. Maybe they were right. Maybe no one cared. Maybe she was wasting her time, but she couldn't stop. She had to try. This was her last chance. The night before the science fair, Claire stayed up late in her room, staring at the pieces of her project scattered across the table. Her hands trembled as she worked, the clock ticking in the background. What if it didn't work? What if she messed up in front of the entire school? The thought made her stomach churn, but there was no turning back now. The morning of the science fair was chaos. Students scrambled to set up their projects in the gymnasium. Teachers buzzed around, organizing the event. Claire arrived early, her project hidden beneath a large cloth. Her heart pounded in her chest, each step feeling heavier than the last. As she set up her project in a corner of the gym, she could feel the eyes on her. The whispers started almost immediately. What's she got under there? Bet it's something boring. Probably another dumb robot. The bullies, as usual, circled around her, watching with smug grins. "You think you're going to win this thing, Claire?" One of them sneered. "You? Please, you'll be lucky if you don't embarrass yourself." Claire didn't respond. She focused on her project, her fingers shaking as she adjusted the last few pieces, but the words stuck with her, gnawing at the back of her mind. Embarrass herself. Was that what was going to happen? As the science fair began, Claire stood at her station, watching as students presented their projects one by one. The gym was filled with excitement and laughter, but Claire could barely hear it over the pounding in her ears. She was terrified. And then it was her turn. The room quieted as the principal called her name. Claire stepped forward, her legs feeling like they might give out beneath her. She took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the sea of faces. Some were curious, others skeptical. And then there were the bullies, standing near the back, smirking, waiting for her to fail. With shaking hands, Claire pulled the cloth off her project. For a moment there was silence. And then, a few quiet laughs. The bullies started whispering to each other, giggling. "That's it?" one of them said a little too loudly. "You've got to be kidding." Claire's heart sank. It was happening. She was going to embarrass herself just like they said. But then, something unexpected happened. Her project whirred to life. The laughter died down as the audience watched in confusion. The robot she had built, small, unimpressive at first glance, suddenly began to move. Slowly at first, then with more precision. It wasn't flashy, but it was working. Claire's voice was barely above a whisper as she explained what the robot was doing, but as she spoke, her confidence grew. The robot wasn't just a toy. It was designed to solve complex problems, to adapt, to learn. It wasn't just a science project, it was the culmination of months of hard work, late nights, and endless failures. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some were impressed, others still skeptical. But Claire wasn't finished. With a few more adjustments, the robot performed a task that no one in the room expected. It solved a complicated puzzle, one that even the brightest students had struggled with earlier that year. The gymnasium fell silent as the robot completed the task flawlessly. Claire's heart raced. She had done it. But then, disaster struck. A small spark flew from the robot's base. Something was wrong. The crowd gasped as smoke began to rise from the project. Claire's stomach dropped. Number not now. Not after everything. She rushed forward, trying to fix the issue, her hands fumbling with the wires. The robot jerked, sputtered, and then it stopped. The room was dead silent. Claire froze, her hands shaking. She could feel the eyes on her again, the judgment, the pity. The bullies' laughter broke the silence, their taunts louder now, more cruel. "Nice try, loser," one of them called. "Better luck next time." Claire stood there, paralyzed. All her hard work, all her effort, it was ruined. She had failed. But then, something inside her shifted. Claire's heart pounded in her chest, her vision blurring as the words of the bullies echoed in her mind. "Nice try, loser." She could hear the faint laughter rippling through the crowd, but something in her refused to let this moment define her. No, she thought, her hands trembling but not with fear anymore, with determination. This can't be how it ends. She took a deep breath, wiped the sweat from her brow, and knelt down beside the broken robot. The whispers around her grew louder as people muttered, wondering if she was going to give up or make things worse. The judges exchanged glances, clearly ready to move on. But Claire wasn't ready to quit. Not now. Not after everything. She reached into her bag, pulling out a small set of tools. With the confidence that had slowly been growing within her all year, she began making quick adjustments. She could feel everyone watching her, but this time, their opinions didn't matter. All that mattered was fixing the problem. She knew exactly what had gone wrong. A wire connection, a minor oversight she could correct. "I can do this," she told herself, her fingers moving swiftly but precisely. "I know I can." The gymnasium was completely still. No one expected Claire to recover from this, least of all the bullies. But they weren't laughing now. They were watching, their grins fading as Claire worked on her robot with a focused intensity that no one had ever seen before. Seconds felt like hours, but finally, Claire stood up, her fingers covered in grease and her face flushed. She hesitated for just a moment, her mind racing with doubt, before she took one last deep breath and flipped the switch. For a brief, heart-stopping second, nothing happened. And then, the robot flickered to life. The small machine whirred softly, its sensors lighting up. Claire watched with bated breath as it straightened itself and began to move again, resuming the complex task it had been programmed to complete. The audience gasped. Slowly, almost methodically, the robot picked up where it had left off, solving the intricate puzzle with precision and skill. The movements were fluid, smooth, every joint and wire working in perfect harmony. The crowd watched in awe as the little machine navigated its way through the challenge, moving faster, smarter, and more efficiently than it had before. It wasn't just functioning, it was thriving. For a few minutes, the entire gymnasium seemed to hold its breath as the robot completed its final task. And then, with a soft click, it was done. Silence fell over the room. Claire stood frozen, unable to move or speak, her heart pounding in her ears. She had done it. The impossible. The thing no one believed she could do. The silence broke with a single clap, then another and another. Before she knew it, the entire gym was filled with applause, thunderous, deafening applause. Students who had once laughed at her were now on their feet, cheering. Even the teachers and judges seemed stunned by what they had just witnessed. Claire blinked, trying to process the moment, her chest tightening with emotion. She glanced around, catching sight of the bullies in the crowd. Their smug expressions were gone, replaced by disbelief and something else she never thought she'd see on their faces. Respect. For the first time in as long as she could remember, Claire stood tall, her shoulders back, her heart filled with something she hadn't felt in years. Pride. Real, undeniable pride. But then, the announcement. The science fair wasn't over yet. The principal took the microphone, clearing his throat. The moment everyone had been waiting for was here. Who would win the competition? Claire's stomach twisted into knots again. Sure, her robot had worked, but was it enough? There were other great projects on display, flashier ones. What if the judges didn't see what she saw in her work? What if after all this she still didn't win? As the principal listed off the honourable mentions, Claire barely heard him, her mind racing with doubt again. She caught glimpses of the other students receiving their awards, smiling and laughing with their friends. She watched, wondering if she had done enough to stand among them. She wanted to believe, but the fear of failure still clung to her like a shadow. Finally, the principal reached the final announcement. The winner of this year's science fair. Claire's breath caught in her throat. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides. She stared down at the ground, too afraid to meet anyone's eyes. This was it. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she waited for what felt like an eternity. And then, Claire Thompson. The world stopped. For a second she thought she had imagined it. But no, it was real. People were clapping, cheering, her name was being called. She had won. She had won. The crowd roared as she slowly walked forward to accept her trophy, her hands shaking so badly she thought she might drop it. She felt numb, like she was floating above her own body, watching everything unfold as if it were happening to someone else. But it wasn't someone else. It was her. She had done it. As she stood there, trophy in hand, the noise around her faded into the background. For the first time in her life, Claire didn't care about what others thought. She didn't need their approval. She had proven to herself what she was capable of. And that was all that mattered. The bullies? They didn't matter anymore. The years of torment, the cruel words, the laughter. None of it could touch her now. Claire had risen above it all, and she had won.